Secretaría Jurídica de la organización, a las y los representantes.
Permanent representatives of the OAS, welcome. We have the statutory quorum, and we can now kick off this special session of the Permanent Council convened by document CP Inf 10760/25 Rev 2, in virtue of which, in subsection B, Article 37 of the Rules of Procedure.
Conocimiento.
As you will all know, as delegations that you are, the permanent missions of the United States, Antigua, Barbuda, Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador, Honduras, and Paraguay asked that this meeting be held. And the point of the meeting would be specifically to consider recent events in the Republic of Honduras at the eve of the general elections that are to take place in that country on November 30th, coming right up. This you can see spelled out in document CP Inf 10754/25 Addenda 1, 2, and 3. Now, given that, and in conformity with Article 43, I should say, of the Rules and Regulations of the Permanent Council, you will have a program in document CP-OD where you will see the list of 4 panelists that Honduras has suggested, as well as those put forward by the delegation of the United States. As I said earlier, there are 4 panelists, which is the maximum number that Article 40F of our Rules of Procedure specifies. Without further objection, or any objection, we proceed to the approval of what I have just read. Thank you very much. Now, moving right along, and in consequence with what Honduras has requested, we are being asked to waive the maximum amount available to speakers per Article 57, Rule 18, and the voting would be taking place established in Article 58, and Ambassador Gigardo Torres then will be able to speak a full 10 minutes. Argentina, Ecuador, and the United States have respectively asked that this be put to you so that you can jointly and severally grant these delegations an extension of the time that they can speak up to 7 minutes total. If there is no objection, it is so decided. Let us now move to item 2. And in compliance with F of the note in the regulation, we are now considering the panelists that I have just mentioned, and we welcome them most warmly. And runner-up, first of all, we have Carlos Ochoa of the Honduran Electoral Association, who is going to be with us remotely. And I'd like to ask Mr. Ochoa if he is ready to intervene, and can the people in the room tell us if we are able to hear him at this time. Do please remember, sir, that you have the floor for a maximum of 10 minutes, at the end of which time the transmission will be cut and we will move along. But before I proceed any further, I should say, I want to be very sure no one is asking for the floor. Apparently not. I misunderstood, says the chair. No one is asking for the floor at this time. Therefore, I think we can now see on our screen, indeed we now do see on our screen, Mr. Marlon Ochoa, who will be speaking for a maximum of 10 minutes. Distinguished members of the Permanent Council, distinguished ambassadors, and diplomatic corps as a whole, greetings all. We will be holding on November 30th are general elections. And despite the conspiracy that some have attempted to launch against our electoral process, a substantive amount of our electoral process is already out there in the country and ready to be used for purposes of voting on that day. And I'm here to tell you that 12,911 letters have already been distributed per the 14 departments in the country and people abroad. Over the 18 departments of the country, there are more than 17,000 and some bags that have been distributed. And as I say, in our 14 departments, those suitcases, those cases are under the strictest security. The sending forth of that information, of that material, and the electoral material itself shows that things are underway. And I can say without any further ado that the whole of the Honduran people will be able to find the voting polls open, and those who are ready to receive them for ballots to be cast and then counted on the day that has been set forth as Electoral Day. Now let me state further that as the public servant that I am, I have an obligation to speak forth if I know of any contemplated misdemeanor or worse. And in order to take preventive measures, there will be audio equipment established, and Councillor Jose Lopez Osorio will be present. Tomas Zambrano will be present as well, and also an active military officer. The public office has now confirmed that there is no possible conspiracy that could be derived from this. And the preliminary results that might come from this, and the use of connectivity and any use of the instruments of the electoral machinery, is therefore set forth as I have explained it here. But let me make it clear that what we have taped will express what the preliminary results show. Councillor Lopez Osorio has stated, for instance, per what has been taped, and let me quote her here, that the results had better be gathered with delay. She was there referring to the transmission of results. And later on she says, and I quote her again, the question of transmission to the centers is well guarded, very well guarded, she goes on to say. And in these tapes, we also see mention made of the political aspects involved in terms of time. And there, the tapes tell us that what is most important is the preliminary information that is going to be broadcast the night of the elections, and that had better go for a particular candidate of the opposition. So quite aside from what the popular vote shows, that is what that person thinks should happen. And Deputy Zambran goes on to say that publicly, and I quote, we want to generate an electoral crisis so that no one from outside will recognize the validity of the elections, and so that they have to be repeated. This tells us that there are plans to carry out the necessary, presumably legitimate steps, but with the final result that this will not be valid at all. And Lopez Osorio says that without full connectivity, of course, we would say that the result of the elections will show that some zones come first and others not. And she says, and I quote, don't forget that the first results have got to come from where we have the most connectivity and therefore the ability to collect the most votes. Because who cares about the rest, she says. When it's time to say that the opponent is ahead, that's not going to be heard. At the end of the day, we can manage not managing to recognize or to tally those votes. Those are, ladies and gentlemen, as we have heard taped, precisely what she said. And elsewhere, Councillor Lopez Osorio goes on to state that the issue of connectivity at the end of the day is what matters most to us. Full stop. So we had better batten down the question of connectivity. And with regard to connectivity itself, she goes on to say, with a wink and a nod, we know what is planned. Now that, ladies and gentlemen, tells you what you need to know, because this patently shows that there's going to be an inequality in how these votes are in fact tallied and made public. And in that regard, it's important to understand that the national presumed program for the publication of results is going to say, well, we were unable to cover the full country. And that is something that I personally saw, where I understand the plan is that putting up the sham of the impossibility of sharing the elections is very much a plan and not an accident at all. So this tells us how several different bodies are very much part and parcel of what is planned. Lopez Osorio says that part of that plan is to make sure, and here again I quote her verbatim, we have to be able to declare that these elections are invalid. And she goes on to say, well, I say it in the plural us, but what I mean is by those who are tallying the results of the election. So Tomas Zambrano, a deputy, and the active representative of the military who speaks to you now, is here to tell you that the use of connectivity and the coordinated use and misuse or plan of certain observers to misread and misrepresent the result of the elections is what we have to denounce here. And given these proofs of what we know is being plotted, we have put it to the public ministry, that is, to the prosecutor's department, and made it known. Because everything that has been planned to ensure that the election reflect the will of the Honduran people is being planned against. So with the competence of the Republic of Honduras and in support of the electoral process, we have done what we needed to do, and we have put all necessary power in hands of the armed forces in order to ensure that the custody and the transport and the guarding of the electoral bags and the ballots that have been cast have been duly planned. And the logistics that are involved in terms of preparing the electoral material is also now fully planned as well. This in full respect of the electoral process, but of course in full respect also of the executive arm of the government, so that people can come forth and vote whatever they will. So we are here denouncing a conspiracy to make very sure that the sham that had been planned is something that has to be stopped. We need to keep the community and the international community duly informed. Let me close by calling out most respectfully to the members of the Organization of American States. And here is the call. Honduras calls for support and observation, not for you to supplant the sovereign will of the Honduran people, but to buttress the right that our citizens have to cast their ballots freely. We want this support, if you'd be so kind, to be granted very much in support of the upholding of the right of free determination of the states. And that is why I speak to you here. And it is certainly the commitment that the Federal Electoral Commission has taken. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señor Ochoa, por su presentación.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ochoa, for that presentation. For the next presentation, I offer the floor to the Judge Mario Morazan from the Electoral Tribunal of Justice of Honduras. Mr. Morazan, you have the floor for 10 minutes. Your Excellencies, good afternoon. Although it's not common for it to be requested that a judge of a high court of the member states be asked to speak, such as of the electoral election court, but from the chief magistrate of the tribunal, electoral tribunal, has requested that other sectors that are stakeholders in this process do take part. And so I have requested that the Office of Foreign Affairs allow for my participation. The electoral court was created 5 years ago, and it is made up of 5 judges, 3 titular judges, and 2 alternates. We also have the National Electoral Council, which is in charge with organizing the logistics of elections to be held next Sunday, November 30th. Also, on election years, the Office of the Attorney General creates a special unit against election crimes. Now, within the purview of the Electoral Court, there have arisen some matters of concern owing mostly to a lack of understanding of that magistrate's role on the court, and given the prior position that magistrate held for over a decade when he presided, when the former President Juan Orlando was the President of the Republic and set up this electoral body. So many of you have seen documentation that has been circulated, and in those documents you can see that there is mention made of a possible crisis and precautionary or delay tactics that have been issued. And I would like to say that those irregular activities that have taken place within the electoral court, mostly at the hands of the president, and this is being brought up here for you to bear witness to this and to know what we are calling into question, whom and what is it that we are calling into question or championing or defending. Now, given that, we do see here that the chief magistrate of this court on the 8th of October at 4:18 convened a meeting to learn of 2 precautionary measures that have been requested. The document that you have on the left-hand side, you see that this is simply a convening of a regular session. No agenda was annexed to that, but it wasn't until we received an email with the support documents where we do see the 2 requests for precautionary measures and regarding some controversial cases of candidates to the position of representatives who had taken part in primary elections wanting to sign up to run in the general elections. This is not allowed in my country, and usually in general elections there is no pre-candidate taking part who had lost an internal election, and that then is allowed to take part in general elections. Now, the interesting matter here is that we received 4:23 in the afternoon, this request to convene this meeting, notwithstanding that request reached the electoral tribunal, did not reach the tribunal until 5:14. So let me be clear. The chief judge took it upon himself before the parties actually made those requests for the precautionary measures to do this. Now, the following day, I asked for an explanation why this request had been made before the parties actually requested it, and I did not receive a response. And furthermore, it was they wanted us to hear about these precautionary measures that have been requested before the tribunal took knowledge of it, to learn about the existence of these pre-candidates. Given these situations, I said that I could not take part in the approval of the agenda nor in the session itself. That said, despite the fact, as you can observe here, the in Article 35 of the electoral law lays forth in no uncertain terms that the quorum of magistrates is of 3 of those titular magistrates. That is, you can have 2 titular judges and then an alternate. However, despite that, they decided that they could hold a session with only 2 magistrates in attendance. And regarding Article 32, second article says that decisions of the electoral tribunal are to be adopted by the full by the plenary of this tribunal court. There are so many things I could say, but I'm going to address some of the requests presented to recuse themselves of this session, and the procedure of set forth in Article 47 of the organic law of the law of elections was not taken into account. Now, this goes back to in 27th of October 2025, and at 2:36 in the p.m., this ruling was being read from the court, and this resolution that was going to be issued by the Chief Justice on this court, what was being said is that the magistrate, the titular magistrate, and the alternates had been legally convened, but they did not arrive at the session without offering any excuse for that. This was in 2:35 in the afternoon. And ultimately, as you can see here, the undersigned was convened on the spur of the moment at 2:45 in the morning. So it was decided that a session would commence, and after the fact, then I, as a titular magistrate, would be convened, as well as the alternate magistrates. Now, this was unnecessary, because what was sought was to issue this resolution, in which it was to be said that as we had not arrived, that they could hold the session without us. Now, this session was usurping functions of the National Congress of the Republic, which expressly says how such a quorum is to what comprises a quorum. Now, immediately after that resolution, the Flores Urrutia, the chief judge, a resolution had been issued against him, calling to throw this out wholesale, and along with another magistrate, then the repeals, or rather the appeals, would be presented, and on the next day, they had intended to issue the definitive ruling on these cases. Now, the summons it was decided that starting from that point on, it would no longer be necessary to call in a third magistrate, be it an alternate or a titular magistrate, that the most important decision is the ruling that defined these two cases. There was no convening of this or summons of those judges, and that said, this judgment was issued that says that only those two would be admitted, given the unjustified and the repeated non-appearance of the undersigned and the titular judge and the alternatives, even though we had not even been asked to appear. Now, naturally, this ruling was not admitted by the National Electoral Council, owing to the fact that it was not in accordance with the formalities of the electoral law. It was not approved. And in order for the electoral tribunal to move forward and continue carrying out their activities, this irregularity would have to be overcome. Thank you very much for your remarks. Questions aren't allowed right now orally, so if you have any written answers or responses you would like to offer, that opportunity is given to you on under equal conditions for all parties involved. So I thank you for that presentation. Next. We have Mr. Garrastazu. I think I have a problem here with the transcript.
Sí, vamos a hacer tenemos que hacer un enroque ahí. En consecuencia.
So once again, I thank Magistrate Morazan for his presentation. I now give the floor to Mr. Antonio Garrastazu, who is the Senior Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of the National Democratic Institute. You have the floor for 10 minutes.
Distinguished members of the Permanent Council of the Mission of Organization of American States, thank you for the opportunity to speak today on the situation in Honduras ahead of Sunday's general elections. I would like to start by commending the United States, Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador, and Paraguay for their leadership in soliciting this extraordinary session, given the climate of democratic erosion that persists in Honduras. As one of the region's most volatile democracies, Honduras continues to confront deeply rooted challenges, including pervasive corruption, endemic violence, and institutional fragility, classified as a hybrid regime by the Economist 2024 Democratic Index. Since taking office in 2022, President Xiomara Castro's administration has struggled to restore public confidence in democratic institutions, intensified political polarization, and aggravated concerns regarding the integrity of the electoral process. The OAS electoral mission in Honduras, led by former Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Eladio Loizaga, earlier this month, stressed the unprecedented daily attacks against the integrity of the process. The Venezuelization of the electoral process must not be permitted to metastasize across our hemisphere. It must be confronted head-on. And this special session elevates the organization's responsibility in preserving the spirit of its democratic charter. Now, the general elections will take place in a context of profound institutional fragility, characterized by partisan divisions, historical distrust, corruption, violence, and impunity that collectively undermines the credibility and integrity of the electoral process. Honduras' electoral framework, which was reformed in 2019, was intended to enhance independence and transparency. Instead, persistent weaknesses have fostered a polarized environment where mutual accusations of fraud and interference dominantly eroding public confidence. The electoral system has been captured by three dominant parties through a tripartite mechanism that facilitates systemic manipulation through partisan appointments, illicit financing, as well as judicial and military interference. This perpetuates the integrity of information, resulting in paralysis, distrust, and heightened risks of fraud. Now, the March 2025 primary elections were a harbinger of things to come. The process was plagued by logistical problems and allegations of weakness in the integrity of the electoral process. International bodies such as the European Union and this very institution have raised alarms over electoral council divisions, lack of military neutrality, and political manipulation, which erodes trust in institutions and hinders democratic consolidation. During the primaries, opposition leaders and civil society organizations claimed manipulation of vote counts and transmission systems given structural failures, logistical delays in the preliminary results transmission system, better known as TREP, fueling claims of digital tampering. The Center of Study for Democracy in its August 2025 electoral monitoring report noted failures, including the amount of time it took, over 12 hours, to distribute technological kits and electoral materials, particularly in San Pedro Sula and Tegucigalpa, opposition strongholds with the greatest electoral weight. The report is based on direct observation, technical audits, and incident logs, widely cited by local partners, including A More Just Society and the National Anti-Corruption Council, among others, as proof of the CNE's institutional breakdown. Now, the National Electoral Council and Electoral Justice Tribunal, designed to be technocratic, suffer from structural partisanship. Each of the three main parties appoint one commissioner to the CNE, leading to chronic gridlock and politicized decisions. Commissioners treating accusations of improper procedures or supposed actions in violation of electoral law have led to distrust that can easily manifest into possible post-election disputes and erode public trust in the CNE. This tripartite setup has paralyzed operations, delaying contracts for critical functions such as a TREP, vital for real-time reporting and external audits, while exposing vulnerabilities in voter registries and ballot security. Indeed, CNE contracts were only awarded in August, 3 months before the elections, to questionable firms such as the Venezuelan company Spartamatic. A clear vulnerability in Honduras' electoral Honduras's electoral census, meant to be a bedrock of democracy, now stands as a glaring symbol of institutional fragility. Over 6.5 million eligible voters, including nearly 500,000 living abroad, are at risk due to outdated records and incomplete biometric systems. Hondurans living in Spain, for example, will be unable to participate, giving budget constraints affecting roughly 67,000 potential voters. International observers, including the EU and OAS, have flagged these issues as risks to electoral integrity. These failures, such as the recent delays in the delivery of over 200,000 voting credentials for an array of positions, including party poll watchers, not only violate OAS equity standards, but fuel a sense of exclusion and legal uncertainty, putting the very legitimacy of Honduras's democracy in question. The fragmentation of the CNE has become a major obstacle, exacerbating institutional fragility. Of major concern expressed by the opposition is a declaration of a winner within the constitutional time frame. If the CNE is unable to fulfill this mandate, Congress will take this responsibility. Congress, however, is currently operating through a 9-member permanent commission, raising concerns about legitimacy and potential bias, giving the commission's dominance by the Libre Party members. The Electoral Tribunal of Justice, as we just heard earlier, also faces pressure. The public ministry raided its offices in July over allegations of conspiracies, and just this month sought to strip immunity from 2 magistrates from judicial misconduct. Actions critics decry as executive overreach to immediate opposition-aligned officials. The armed forces, meanwhile, are constitutionally mandated to guarantee the validity and security of the election process. Persistent doubts remain regarding this neutrality. During the primary elections, the armed forces failed to deliver electoral materials to several voting centers, including polling stations in cities with strong support for the opposition. To date, the Attorney General has not investigated the military's malfeasance. This lack of accountability has deepened systemic mistrust, with the opposition arguing that official candidate, former Defense Minister Rixi Moncada, is at a tactical advantage. Given the state of emergency across 226 out of 298 municipalities, the ruling party and military have the ability to manipulate the results and quell protests in case of electoral fraud. Now, persistent instability does not merely threaten local governance. It reverberates across borders, directly impacting regional priorities such as border security, the fight against transnational organized crime, and the preservation of robust economic ties. If the electoral process is compromised by fraud or contestation, the resulting political upheaval will almost certainly fuel a surge in migration, embolden criminal networks, and erode regional democratic norms. Corruption, organized crime, economic hardship, state capture through the weakening of institutions, and widespread violence targeting organized civil society, religious institutions, and the private sector dominate this election cycle. There has also been an uptick in media attacks. Press freedom organizations, such as PEN International, have warned of increased judicial harassment, digital surveillance, administrative pressure, and public accusations of high-ranking officials, including the military, which have created a hostile environment for independent media. In this climate, the CNE faces a complex set of challenges, including logistical inefficiencies, polarization, low public trust, vulnerabilities to illicit financing, and difficulties ensuring transparent voter verification. Honduran democracy is at risk and heading toward a Venezuelization if the integrity of Sunday's elections is not taken seriously, effectively impacting the stability, security, and prosperity of our beloved region. Thank you very much.
Le agradezco por
Thank you for your remarks, and thank you for sticking to the allotted time. Now, we welcome the presentation by Deborah Umer, the Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean of the National Democratic Institute, who is with us virtually. I would ask the Secretariat if we can now connect her.
entonces, señora.
Ms. Umer, you have the floor for 10 minutes.
Thank you. Distinguished permanent representatives, Ambassador Tomás Pascual, President of the OAS Permanent Council, Secretary General Albert Ramdin, Assistant Secretary General Laura Gil, Secretary for Strengthening Democracy Sebastián Kralevich, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity to address the Permanent Council. I have worked for more than 25 years carrying out programs to strengthen democracy and human rights in Latin America and the Caribbean, including living and working in Honduras, where I witnessed post-election violence in 2017. Based on its long history of supporting democracy and credible elections in Honduras, since 2009, the National Democratic Institute, NDI, with support from the National Endowment for Democracy, organized a bipartisan pre-election assessment in early August. NDI's findings and recommendations and assistance to the broad citizen initiative Observadores Electorales por Honduras and observations that follow. As Honduras heads to the November 30th elections, the stakes extend far beyond its borders. At a moment when democracy is being tested around the globe, this vote will determine more than who governs Honduras. It will shape the country's stability. A credible election in Honduras is essential to avoiding a slide into deeper political instability. The larger danger is more profound: a leadership that assumes office without a genuine mandate, weakening democratic checks, further eroding public confidence, and undermining the country's governability in lasting ways. Honduras faced this election with deep distrust in their institutions, rooted in the 2009 constitutional crises that led to a coup d'etat, and the 2017 presidential re-election when allegations of fraud resulted in deadly post-election violence. Recent votes have not only stoked public mistrust and instability, the March general primaries were marred by failures to safeguard ballots and significant voting delays in the country's two largest cities, Tegucigalpa and San Pedro Sula. Since its August mission, NDI has heard consistent concerns about undue political interference and legal pressures on the National Electoral Council and the Electoral Justice Tribunal. These actions contribute to a serious deterioration of democratic norms as sustained pressures from other branches of government against electoral authorities deepen the risk of a prolonged political crisis. While criminal and administrative oversight are fundamental to the rule of law, such processes must not obstruct the CNE's ability to manage the electoral process or the TJE's responsibility to adjudicate disputes. As Secretary General Ramdeen recently emphasized, electoral authorities must be allowed to carry out their technical work in accordance with the law, free from interference and undue pressure of any political actor. In this respect, the work of the CNE hinges on the cooperation of all political actors and government institutions, especially the armed forces, which are constitutionally mandated not only with safeguarding ballots and providing overall election security, but also with guaranteeing the orderly transfer of power. Political actors from all sides have contributed to an environment where electoral results risk being contested before votes are even counted. Most recently, the ruling party candidate publicly announced she will not accept as valid any results from the preliminary results transmission system. In light of this, the only antidote to ensure that results counted within the institutions and conflicts are resolved in the appropriate jurisdictions, protecting institutional independence now is essential to keeping the count within the legal framework where it belongs. In this regard, NDI is still hopeful that a credible and transparent election is possible. To that end, the timing of this permanent council meeting coming just days before the elections is perfect. I would like to offer the following recommendations for this body's consideration. First, NDI applauds the Secretary General's timely statements in support of free and fair elections in Honduras. Similarly, NDI is encouraged by this permanent council meeting to promote constructive dialogue on the electoral preparations and to underscore the need for adherence to the principles enshrined in the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Second, NDI encourages the OAS to not only support their own observation mission, but also affirm the importance of Honduran observers and convey its strong support for their work, emphasizing that nonpartisan and independent observation is essential for public confidence in the vote. Third, the OAS should also urge respect for minimum standards for electoral integrity, including ensuring the timely completion of all aspects of elections, which encompasses voting, ballot transmission, the vote count, and declaration of final results, supporting electoral institutions so that they can fulfill their duties and promote public confidence in the electoral process, publishing prompt, definitive, and verifiable results, including polling station level results, and demonstrating unwavering respect for the will of the people, addressing unresolved electoral complaints impartially, promptly, and in strict compliance with the law, preventing further violence, intimidation, or wrongful prosecution of politically active individuals, election officials, or civic leaders. And finally, guaranteeing access to all aspects of the electoral process, free from harassment, threats, and criminalization. The Honduran people deserve credible and transparent elections in which their votes are counted accurately and their voices are respected. However, Hondurans are heading into elections under far from optimal conditions, marked by a prolonged state of emergency, political pressures, and escalating messages of violence. In this context, the presence and accompaniment of the international community before and after the vote will be essential to foster dialogue and help ensure a peaceful resolution of the electoral process. Distinguished representatives, thank you again for the opportunity to address the Permanent Council. As always, NDI stands ready to continue working with the OAS member states and our partners across the hemisphere to strengthen democratic institutions, safeguard electoral integrity, and support citizens who work every day to defend their rights. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
I thank you, Ms. Omer, for your presentation and for sticking to the allotted time. With this, we conclude the second item regarding the presentations by the panelists. Next, we move on to item 3 of today's order of business, which are interventions by member states. We've heard each one of the presentations, and now I open the floor first to, and of course, in the order as the floor has been requested as it appears on the screen. So, with the leave of the delegations in attendance, I give the floor first to the Vice Foreign Minister of Honduras, Torres Zelaya, who will be introduced by the ambassador. This was a request for which you were granted 10 minutes. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Chairman. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the most surprised parties were us when it was said that crime had been, or no crime has been committed and no law has been violated. None of the member states here would like to have this done to them, to convene a permanent council about them when, now I know many of you are very effective readers, but you have me here as the Albert Camus character, in which people were convened on the death of his mother. And I would just like to remind you that today is November 25th. This is a very special day because it's International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women. 65 years when Ms. Viraval was killed in the Dominican Republic by the dictatorship. Now, and speaking of women, it was in Honduras. We do have a number of we have a female candidate, and the president of Honduras is a woman. I always say a Honduran candidate because she is a woman. She is Honduran, rather, and our current president, Xiomara Castro. Now, it's true that we have good news today. 16 years ago, Honduras had no access to the Millennium Funds. This morning, we woke up to the news that Honduras now is eligible to have access to the Millennium account, and that shows the good work that President Xiomara Castro has carried out, because let's not forget that the coup of État of June of 2019 against President Zelaya and against the Honduran people led us to 12 months and 7 months, 12 years and 7 months of narco dictatorship, and as one of the panelists said, corruption over those 12 years, and murders over those 12 years, drug trafficking over those 12 years. We lost all of our rights over those 4 years, while President Xiomara Castro, in fewer than 4 years now, has led us to have a elevated life standard of living in our country. All these different narratives that have been come up have been invented, cut out of whole cloth. They've been made up. I just wanted to start by saying that, make that introductory remark so that I can now introduce my colleague, the Vice Foreign Minister, Mr. Torres, also a journalist.
Gracias, embajador.
Thank you, Ambassador, and I greet everyone in attendance. Your Excellency, Chair of the Permanent Council, Tomás Pascual, Honorable Ambassador Alberto Ramdin, Secretary General of the OAS, ladies and gentlemen, special guests, observers, distinguished, again, everyone here in attendance. Now, Honduras will come to this special meeting of the Permanent Council with the certainty that democracy, representative democracy, is an indispensable condition for stability, peace, and development throughout our region, just as the charter of this organization says, and the Democratic Inter-American Democratic Charter of the OAS. We have also come to express our determination, that of President Xiomara Castro, to join as a requester of this meeting to ensure that the general elections of November 30th be a model of transparency, liberty, and legitimacy. 16 years ago, at the OAS, under José Miguel Insulza as the Secretary General, Honduras was condemned for a coup d'etat that was organized by these very same political parties, now currently the opposition, that today falsely accuse us of wanting to do what they did do in the past, commit crimes that most of which have gone unpunished. That's not very democratic. They want to judge us in advance. Those very people that committed crimes themselves against our democracy. In 2013 and 2017, these same political forces carried out two election fraud cases, also called out by the OAS under the General Secretary Luis Almagro and Xiomara Castro, won peacefully in 2021 the elections, and she brought back the rule of law. Today, 5 days from the election, when we are in the electoral silence period, having received 121 people of the OAS Electoral Observation Committee or mission, and we are here hopefully to shed light on the truth. Let's talk about the facts. By now, all the electoral kits have been delivered to 13 of all of the departments. That is 70% of the departments of Honduras. Tomorrow, 100% of all of the departments of the country will have received those electoral kits. And November 30th, mass elections, transparent elections will be held. Everything that falls to the executive branch to do by way of this election will have been fully carried out. However, there are still some concerns about the results that we've seen by those audits that have been held of the system whereby the preliminary results are conveyed during simulations. A few days out from the election, it said that there aren't the minimum conditions in place to ensure the timely, trustworthy, reliable, full transmission of the results. Now, the General Prosecutor of the Republic, Mr. Zelaya, presented 26 audios in which a voice can be heard that seems to be Councilor Lopez of the National Party speaking with the leader of that very party to create a crisis on the day of the election, to ensure that the elections be held again. I'd like to close my remarks by making some clarifications. First, we have heard here that the Permanent Commission of the National Congress, which is set up precisely because given internal conflicts, progress has not been made in the Congress, and so that was set up for the purpose of appointing or saying who the winner of the election was going to be. That is false. The Congress does not have that authority to declare anyone a winner. Now, something else that's entirely false, that there would be the state of exception declared to address the matter of security, that is something that is thought that would be done to interrupt the elections in the country. We've had our primary elections already, and this state of exception, rather, did not affect the circulation, democratic participation, or the freedom of expression in our country. Today, in fact, the Foreign Ministry of Honduras has issued an explanation to the General Secretariat of the UN about that, and that has also been shared here. In 2024, Honduras had the least violent year of the last 20 years, and that shows the success of our security policies rolled out by this president. Something else that's also false that we want to declare, or clarify rather, and that's the narrative that our government has co-opted all the different branches of the Honduran government. Now, in the case of the electoral authorities, as said by those who spoke before me, most of these powers are held by the opposition, as well as they hold the majority in the Congress, as they do in the Supreme Court of Justice. So, on that, we would just clarify that this majority, the fact that they have the majority in these bodies is the reason that progress has not been made as we would like to have seen. Now, regarding the independence or separation of powers, if the Public Ministerial Office of the Attorney General has found clear evidence of a conspiracy against the democracy, and it falls to it as a duty to launch an investigation. If there are improper practices carried out by those civil servants, then it again is the branch of the power of the legislative branch to investigate. Now, we heard two members of the electoral branch, Mr. Ochoa, Marlon Ochoa, and Mario Morazan of the Electoral Court of Justice Honduras and the Council of Electoral Council, to learn about this recent chapter of our political story. And I, along with Ambassador Roberto Quesada, are here at this plenary to take note of your concerns and to hear your recommendations to ensure that Honduras go down the democratic path so that electoral fraud and any coup d'etat never happen again. Thank you. Thank you, Vice Foreign Minister, of Honduras. I thank you for your presentation. Next, I give the floor to Argentina, who has 7 minutes to speak. Ambassador, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, we take note that the head of the electoral mission of the OAS, that it has already been sent to Honduras last Wednesday, has not been convened here to take stock of the situation on the ground. But I sincerely think that that's a pity, because it would be very important for that to happen. Now, in elections, it's commonplace for there to be political friction. That said, in the case of Honduras, there are certain unprecedented facts that are giving rise to institutional problems. This type of friction or attrition is not something we've seen in other presidential elections in our region. And just by way of an example, I could talk of Uruguay, Bolivia, and Chile, who were the last countries to have elections. And as we all know, the national government is the guarantor of clean, transparent, and legal elections. With all respect of the sovereign decision to my colleagues from Honduras, I would like to say that perhaps it might have been more appropriate, such that we would have more information about this situation, to have convened to represent the institutions, the independent electoral bodies of Honduras, the president of the electoral court or of the electoral council. Then one person who is renowned, sadly, for taking a selfie showing him partying as acts of vandalism were being carried out. So just think about this for a minute, that someone who takes part in front of an embassy carrying out defacing property to speak independently of transparent and clean elections in his or her country. I'm referring to unprecedented facts that have happened in Honduras that electoral authorities have verified, and that are the reasons and no other that gave rise to this special meeting having been convened. I would just mention this: the denial for a magistrate and alternative magistrates to take part. Public defamatory messages that seek to undermine the tribunal court, allowing entry of agents into the tribunal of election, harassment, surveillance, and undue pressure brought against judges, criminal process that are being interfered in involving the elections. All of these unprecedented facts took place in a general context of the undermining of the democratic process to keep, that is, to, and the Congress is in recess, incompatible with the Constitution, replacing the Congress by way of a permanent council with bodies that aren't legitimate. undermining fundamental rights during an election, and that which has been said about the growing role of the armed forces beyond the strictures defined by the Constitution of the Republic that puts in check the integrity of the elections. It would seem that all of these events not only called the attention of the co-sponsors of this special meeting, but of other players as well. Let me just cite a few. Report of the Working Group of Honduras of the Human Rights Council. The National Human Rights Commissioners communique, the UN that is the Human Rights Council of the UN, having also addressed this, the EU of Norway, the Spanish Parliament, Spain, Switzerland, Korea, France, Belgium, and the US, among other countries who have addressed this. The electoral mission of the OAS in Honduras calling for proper conditions to be allowed to hold these elections, understanding that what has been done by the Office of the Attorney General actually undermines the carrying out of these elections. I should also talk about the declaration of the General Secretary of the OAS. So, Mr. Chair, there is an elephant in this room, even though we want to feign dementia. So, to request a special permanent council meeting to express concern about what's taking place inside and outside of Honduras, this cannot be considered a trial. This is truly an opportunity for the whole hemisphere to learn about the real concerns that exist, and an opportunity for Honduras to clarify itself and to reassert its commitment to ensure there be a transparent election held without any type of electoral interference. I believe that this special council should be considered as an act of preventive diplomacy by the OAS that allows us to ratify the support of all of the members that take part of the electoral mission in Honduras, and to make clear, to issue a clear message that needs to be heard throughout the continent. There is no place for rigged elections or the manipulation of election results, violating popular sovereignty, and I am not referring to any country in particular. I believe wholeheartedly that preventive diplomacy, had we used this in the case of Nicaragua and Venezuela, we most likely would have avoided the authoritarian regimes of Ortega and Maduro. That's why the OAS is obliged to disencourage any actor who might intend to violate the democratic charter. So, Mr. Chair, Argentina will now have 42 years of uninterrupted democracy. This is a commitment that we have for democracy and freedom, which means we will not accept the diplomacy of silence. We don't seek any type of confrontation. We don't want to raise or exacerbate those that already exist. We alert the Americas and the whole world before it's too late, and so that all of us together in good faith, committed to the democratic charter, can dissuade any type of threat to democracy in any country of our hemisphere. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Muchas gracias, embajador, por su intervención.
Thank you very much indeed, Ambassador, for your statement. And let me now give 7 minutes to the United States.
Much, Mr. President. The United States would like to start by thanking Chile as chair of this permanent council for convening this special session. We also thank our co-sponsors today for engagement at this critical moment for democracy in Honduras. The United States shares the concerns raised by the OAS Electoral Observation Mission and the OAS Secretariat regarding interference, intimidation, and political pressure affecting the National Electoral Council and the Electoral Justice Tribunal in Honduras. Over the past few weeks, the OAS mission has issued some of the strongest warnings in recent years regarding the autonomy and safety of electoral authorities in a member state. The mission made clear that Honduras must guarantee, quote, the full independence and autonomy of the electoral authorities so they can focus on their technical work, unquote. It warned of pressure and interference. And yet, members of Honduras's National Electoral Council, which runs the election, tallies the votes, and certifies the winner, have been and continue to be subjected to intimidation and harassment. Events leading up to these Honduran elections deeply concern us. It appears that Honduras is already in crisis. Members of the National Electoral Council have been chilled by threats, and the armed forces have been rumbling. The Council and its commissioners need to be able to do their jobs. The members of the OAS need to speak up now, before the elections. Without your voices calling for a transparent process free of fraud and violence, I fear Honduras faces an uncertain future. I therefore urge you to use your collective voice to warn officials in Honduras of the consequences of meddling in the process or interfering with the results. Elections must be held on November 30th. Electoral officials must be able to do their jobs free from interference. And the full Congress must be permitted to carry out its legislative functions rather than a 9-member commission chosen for political loyalty. If the government of Honduras hopes to reassure this body, and more importantly, its own citizens, of the integrity of the electoral process, we call for a commitment to upholding Honduran legal requirements, a commitment to maintain the independence of the National Electoral Council, a commitment that only the full Congress, not a select committee, will engage in the electoral process as needed, a commitment that the military will adhere to the roles defined by the Constitution, safeguarding electoral materials without involvement in vote counting, and maintain a nonpartisan position, and a commitment by all the candidates and parties not to claim victory until indicated by the CNE. Let me be very clear. The United States supports the integrity of the democratic process in Honduras. The Honduran people must not be robbed of their opportunity to choose their next president and other authorities in elections free from fraud, whose results credibly reflect the will of the people. These principles are not partisan, they are foundational. Our Congressional House Foreign Affairs Committee held a bipartisan hearing last Thursday to address concerns regarding Honduran elections. This is a cause in which we are united across the political spectrum. The principle of democratic elections align with the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which affirms that the peoples of the Americas have a right to democracy and that their governments have the obligation to defend it. Al pueblo de Honduras les dejo.
And I say to the people of Honduras the following: we hear you and we are with you. Go out and vote on November 30th to be a part and a member of the future of your democratic country and a democratic hemisphere.
Por su intervención. A continuación tiene el uso de la palabra Paraguay.
Gracias, presidente.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, as we await the general elections that are going to be held on November 30th in Honduras, the Republic of Paraguay would like to speak its concern for the most recent accounts that would appear to be contaminating and twisting the electoral process in that country. The Electoral Observance Mission and the people in charge here at the OAS would say as much. So we're very worried not to see here on the panel any titulars of the council or anybody else who is in a position of authority. We believe, as others must hear, that our charter at the OAS states that democracy is a right of the peoples and that it is our obligation to promote it and to defend it. So participation, through which citizens express their will through periodic elections, is something that we must stand up for. And that is why I join those at the OAS that call respectively on all those who would in any way erode or in any other manner undermine the authorities of the Hondurans. And at the next elections, we can only hope that things will be smooth and respectful. The constitutional rights of the Honduran people mean that going to vote should be something safe and independent. That is a sine qua non requirement for any process that calls itself democratic and just. We also would underscore the importance that every voice, every force, every group of people in Honduras should move in that same direction for free and fair elections. This is key to the preservation of the trust of the Honduran people. That is transcendental, no more, no less, and that will be in the next few days a breaker. So let us hope that the electoral authorities in Honduras will see to it that the links of friendship and respect that unite us all in this room will also be patent in Honduras, and that the representative expectations of the Honduran people will live up to their expectations and our own. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Paraguay, says the chair, and I'm pleased to give the floor now to Panama. Ambassador, a very good afternoon, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, President, Chair, colleagues. We would like to begin by recognizing the work that's been carried out by the proponent delegations that have put this resolution before us. Marlon Ochoa of the National Organization of Honduras, Sienchen and Mario Morazan of the Justice Tribunal, of Honduras, and Justice Garraspazo, PhD, for Latin America and the Caribbean, the International Republican Institute, IRI, and Ms. Deborah Kulmer, Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean, National Democratic Institute, are all here, and greetings. The Republic of Panama feels strongly that democracy is the most vibrant and ongoing value of this democracy. It is our very essence from a political and a national standpoint. And it is most certainly the path that our various nations have chosen to build a future of dignity and shared prosperity. We are here to uphold a fundamental principle. What is that? That is simply our commitment to democracy and a strengthening of the inter-American system, which means peaceful coexistence, effective coexistence, and mutual respect amongst our nations. No more, no less. And at a time of global challenges, when each one of our countries is put to the test, and when the trust of our respective citizens hangs in the balance, let's remember that democracies grow stronger with greater participation, greater transparency, and dare I say it, greater integrity. Democracy grows stronger by that means, and each citizen within it must feel free to choose his or her destiny, his or her future, without a pressure of any kind, without obligations or bindings of any kind. This is citizenship, and this is the heart of institutions living under the rule of law. We're talking about each person's certainty to be able to participate in a political process without fear, in a transparent manner, in an inclusive and legitimate manner. So, Chair, distinguished colleagues, let us now turn our special regard to a sister republic, that is Honduras, a member of this organization and certainly a founding member of the Central American system. And it's going through a historic and difficult process. We'd like to say to you loud and clear, Honduras, hope you can hear us, you are not alone. We stand with you. We believe in competitive and partially observed elections. And when a people stands up for its future, we, all of us, are stronger. The Inter-American system was born precisely for that purpose, to offer a joint and a mutual framework of cooperation, of defense and human rights, and unwavering support for democratic processes. This isn't mere bureaucracy. We are here to put in practice something we believe and something for which some have died. These are unwavering rights that we all hold high, and that is why Panama today speaks loud and clear in favor of every vote being respected, every vote being heard and recorded. These elections have to be free, and they don't belong to any political party and certainly not to any government. To whom do they belong? They belong to the citizenry, and that is so for each one of us. And so we respectfully invite every one of the member countries present here to stand firm and to uphold common solidarity, because that's what it'll take for this process to be held and respected for the legitimate undertaking that it's meant to be. This is solidarity, but it is also full respect for the will of the people. We're talking about sovereignty, no less. This is now a shared obligation amongst us all. When one country moves towards elections that are truly free, we all march free. And when one institution grows stronger anywhere in our hemisphere, we are all stronger wherever we are. And when a people, whichever it is, expresses its hope, we stand with it. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I would now like to give the floor to Brazil. Thank you very much, Chair. Democracy, as we know, is the key principle on which the structural foundations of the OAS is built, and indeed other bodies of regional integration like ECLAC. And in this context, certainly the Inter-American Democratic Charter is a stellar example, and the original document signed in Tegucigalpa says as much. Respect for democracy and to the rule of law as a basic keystone of the environment. That is something that we hope will be fully respected in Honduras as established, where all local institutions and civil liberties and the freedom of the press will be recognized. We in Brazil feel that this is key without exception, and all of those responsible for the holding of this election have a role to play. Brazil hopes, therefore, that every one of the political forces in Honduras will be known for their constructive approach and their respect for the voting, and also an opportunity to allow democracy in Honduras to be reaffirmed as it is and should be by transparency, autonomy, and the efficiency of its electoral institutions and authorities. Finally, Brazil hopes that the electoral observation mission in Honduras will take place. We consider this absolutely fundamental for that country and for all of us, because this is what can best honor the basic principles of our common Inter-American Democratic Charter. As we saw in Guatemala, this is a question of dialogue, not monologue, and it is serious, calm discussion, not histrionics, that's going to make the difference. It's diplomatic dialogue when it is calm and when it is thought through that we can get far. It may seem less attractive than the strident calls, but that doesn't lead anywhere. And when we wish truly to get over a crisis and find sustainable and peaceful ways forward, that's the way to do it. Thank you. Thank you, Distinguished Ambassador for Brazil. I'm pleased to give the floor now to Costa Rica. Thank you. Distinguished Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, distinguished panelists, representatives all, Costa Rica is very pleased indeed to have received the information that the Vice General Torres Zelaya and Ambassador Roberto Quezada have shared with us this afternoon, and indeed for information put forward by each of the delegations. Costa Rica thought that we were simply going to hear what was happening and to have the Electoral Observation Mission in Honduras update us. We're very grateful for what that Electoral Observation Mission is accomplishing. We've taken good note of the call to respect the autonomy of the electoral authorities and to make sure that the necessary conditions are put forward such that the exercise can be conducted in peace. We also take note of such possible sources of destabilization as might be negative here and end up indeed curbing the independence of all of those that are involved. Now, we believe that it's for those very reasons that we need to stand by Honduras with independence, with respect, and with an absolute and unwavering commitment to the rule of law. That is why we fully back the commitment that Mr. Torres Zelaya, the Foreign Minister of Honduras, has expressed to us this afternoon. Electoral processes are a public good in this hemisphere. And the OAS, with its capacity for technical assessment and its support, are a positive thing. Anything that reduces potential confrontation and to offer greater peace and calm at sensitive or difficult moments is something that we fully support. And we say thank you to your professionalism and to what this institution has done and will continue to do. And so we very much hope and pray that Honduras can go forward to its elections peacefully, with resolve, and in the assurance that the decisions taken will always and ever be within a legal framework and never outside it. To that end, Costa Rica stands by the OAS to do what it can to help that that's the case. Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to give the floor now to Uruguay. Thank you very much, Chair. Uruguay, for its part, is also very grateful for the calling of this special session of the Permanent Council so that we can consider the situation in Honduras given the forthcoming general elections to be held on November 30th. The National Electoral Council and the various other authorities that are present here have our respect. We have followed very carefully, sir, the information that has been put forward also to us by those who convened this meeting, and statements that have been made on the various elements that describe the Honduran events, and what the very Secretary General of the organization has also told us. We are grateful to all of you, organizations who are with us here today and others who have enlightened us further. Now, the fact that the OAS is present in the territory, we believe, should weigh very much to the positive to assure the citizens of Honduras that they are not alone and that they have everybody rooting for them, and the assurance that this process will be peaceful and productive. To date, the electoral observation in Honduras gives us a firm belief that that will be the case. And we can only hope that the local authorities will continue to allow them to do what they can do to make sure that the elections take place as they must, in peace and in respect. So Uruguay stands with the government of Honduras in expressing the hope that these elections will be held in peace and in full respect for the electoral rules and laws of that country. We can only hope that those intervening will act with independence and with respect, with due regard to the candidates and to the citizenry and law. And finally, we call on all of the institutional and political parties to think and to act with responsibility and stewardship and a respect for everything that will help the peace and not take it away and uproot and upset the electoral process. We expect full citizenship participation during the elections, and we know that the electoral observation of the OAS will do what it can to make the difference. Uruguay certainly stands with the Honduran authorities as we say this. We're very certain that in peace, electoral processes can only help everyone and the country itself. Thank you very much, sir. I'm pleased to give the floor now to the delegation of Peru. Thank you. We take note of what Mr. Marlo Ochoa has told us, representing the Electoral and National Observation Section, and Mario Morazan, the representative of the electoral observation mission in Honduras. The elections are to be held at the end of November. The Charter of the Organization of American States sets forth how this should happen, specifically what relates to the strengthening and upholding of the internal legal order of every member state and of the peace that the citizenry is entitled to in its elections. We know that the electoral observation missions of the OAS has an important role to play, has been the case always. This is a great contribution to the credibility of the electoral processes of member states. And that's why Peru can express here its expectation that there will be peace, dialogue, and participation in Honduras when those votes are cast. And all civil society, means of communication, the media, and every other actor in the process will contribute to making it a day of peace and not the contrary. We express the hope that the OAS as a whole can be respectful and supportive for Honduras in that day of its great democracy. Thank you. Thank you. I'm happy to give the floor now to Belize.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary General, Madam Assistant Secretary General. The delegation of Belize thanks the Chair of the Permanent Council for convening this special session, as well as the member states who requested the same. We also convey our thanks to the delegation of Honduras and to the panelists presented by them, Councillor Marlon Ochoa from the National Electoral Council and Titular Justice Mario Morazan from the Tribunal of Electoral Justice of Honduras. Thank you as well to Mr. Antonio Garastazu from the International Republican Institute and Ms. Deborah Ulmer from the National Democratic Institute. Mr. Chairman, our delegation has listened carefully to the presentations of today in order to better understand the complex situation in Honduras in the period leading up to the upcoming general elections. In this context, Belize wishes to reiterate its firm and unwavering support for and commitment to free, fair, and transparent elections as a cornerstone of all democratic societies, as has been articulated countless times in this Permanent Council. We note in particular the importance of the work being undertaken by the OAS Election Observation Mission in Honduras, and we reaffirm our support for their function as an important and reassuring component of electoral processes. Finally, Belize expresses its hope that all Hondurans will be able to exercise their right to peaceful participation in the very important democratic exercise that will take place in that country shortly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ambassador. The DR is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of the Dominican Republic would like to express thanks for the convening of this session for us to consider recent goings-on in the Republic of Honduras on the eve of the general elections slated for that country November 30th. We take note of the presentations made by the distinguished panelists, whom we thank, and we greet the Undersecretary Gerardo Torres. My country is closely watching and respectfully watching as facts develop in Honduras. We express our concern for anything that might undermine the elections and to uphold democratic credibility and the trust of the population in the elections, as we've said here, is of the utmost importance under these current circumstances. We reiterate our belief that political and social players are called upon to act with responsibility and a commitment to democracy, ensuring conditions that favor transparency, credibility, and inclusion at every stage of the elections. We also deem it necessary for there to be strict respect for the scheduled elections and the authorities to fall to the electoral body, the schedule rather. We would like to see that there be a reliable election held. The integrity of the institutions is essential, and the electoral body of Honduras should be able to carry out with full autonomy its duties without any type of outside pressure. The Dominican Republic would like to also stress the importance of international observations, and on that we fully support the role of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission, whose technical recommendations seek only to strengthen the integrity of elections and to thereby contribute to peace and political peace. So we thank the effort of the General Secretariat for and the support offered to Honduras to ensure transparent elections. Mr. Chairman, it's very important for us to remind ourselves that anything that might arise, any problem that might arise, needs to be addressed and resolved institutionally and legally. That is the best way to safeguard democratic stability, enabling popular will to be fully and legitimately expressed. The government of the Dominican Republic trusts that the people of Honduras and Honduras' institutions will be able to move or carry out orderly, transparent, and peaceful elections. Our country reasserts its commitment to the clauses of the Inter-American Democratic Charter, as well as respect for the sovereignty, the strengthening of institutions, and hemispheric cooperation. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Colombia. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I thank the Vice Foreign Minister of Honduras and the word expressed by the ambassador of that country and all of the speakers here today. Colombia would like to express its fraternal solidarity toward the people and the state of Honduras at this very important juncture of elections. We recognize that the elections on November 30th represent an important milestone for democracy in Honduras and for the stability of the entire region. First of all, Colombia reasserts its full respect for Honduras' sovereignty as enshrined in the OAS Charter and the Inter-American Democratic Charter that remind us that each state has its inalienable right of organizing its own elections and its political system without any outside meddling. This sovereignty is the basis on which, the foundation on which mutual trust among member states is built, and it is the fundamental aspect of our hemispheric cooperation. That's why we recognize and value the commitments reiterated here by the government of the President Xiomara Castro to ensure free, transparent, and safe elections, as well as her decision to make available, bring to bear all the necessary institutional resources to ensure the proper operation of the National Electoral Council. Colombia recognizes as well the importance that Honduran institutions be allowed to carry out their electoral functions independently, such that all of its members be kept safe so that they can carry out their mandate without free of any type of meddling or undermining of their efforts to ensure the credibility of the elections and also to the benefit of the citizens. Now, the role of the OAS EOM should always seek to be constructive, seeking through the technical support it offers to contribute to bolstering transparency and the integrity of elections without, under any circumstances, supplanting the sovereign authorities of Honduran institutions. We also appreciate the professional and respectful focus and approach of other international missions, such as the EU and its electoral observation. We believe that EOMs should always be neutral, respectful, and non-intrusive, focused on offering technical assistance and observation, avoiding any perception of there being any outside pressure that could undermine the public trust in elections. And to that effect, we reiterate that Colombia is willing to support Honduras here from the OAS bilaterally as well, and everything that it can do to strengthen transparency and trust in institutions and the full exercise of democracy without any type of meddling in its sovereign decisions nor in the elections themselves. Finally, Colombia trusts in the maturity of the democratic system of Honduras, of that of its people, and the resilience of its institutions, and the will of people of Honduras to move toward a legitimate, peaceful, and respectful elections, and thereby the expression of the popular mandate. The stability of Honduras is the stability of our whole region. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. El Salvador has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. El Salvador is grateful for this special meeting of the Permanent Council having been convened, and we recognize the importance of this venue for us to stay abreast of efforts made by member states to strengthen the institutions of democracy throughout the region. We would like to start by expressing our respect for the sovereignty and the self-determination of the people of Honduras. We are fully aware that decisions that define its future fall only to Honduras itself. At the same time, as a neighboring country, we are animated by the belief that democracy is a shared project in our hemisphere, and it's the decision of the people to express that democracy. So the November 30th elections, we hope, will be held in a climate of peace in keeping with the rules that govern the state of Honduras. Democratic cohabitation, stability, belong not only to Honduras but to our whole region. That's why my delegation stresses the importance of constructive dialogue, of respect for the law, and the free exercise of political rights of all Hondurans. El Salvador is willing to continue working toward strengthening any efforts to cooperate with Honduras, reiterating its stance to work hand in hand with those who win the election ultimately as a legitimate expression of the will of the people of Honduras. That this election be held up as an example of commitment to democratic values in the region and an opportunity for us to continue building a future of peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Canada.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Le Canada.
Thank you very much, Chair. Canada hails this very important decision for us to meet together to deal with the question of the upcoming 30th of November elections in our sister Republic of Honduras. We also applaud the decisions of the Honduran authorities in holding these elections. Elections are a very useful exercise, not least because they can serve to uphold the transparency and legitimacy of the entire process and democracy itself, and the very constructive role that the OAS, for its part, can also play in upholding democracy throughout the region. With regard to these specific elections in Honduras, let me state that Canada is concerned by the points that have been flagged by the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS, namely the interference of certain institutions that are supposed to be independent.
Department of Electoral Cooperation and Observation, DECO, stated, "The autonomy and independence of electoral authorities are essential principles in democracy. The free exercise of their functions, as well as the stability of those responsible for organizing and overseeing elections, are fundamental requirements to ensuring democratic processes." Canada echoes the OAS Electoral Observation Mission's call to Honduran institutions and authorities, especially judicial bodies, to guarantee the safety of all electoral officials against any persecution arising from the exercise of their duties. Canada is proud to support the vital work of DECO through its electoral support program for Latin America and the Caribbean. And as the Secretary General of this organization has stated, electoral authorities must be able to carry out their technical work in accordance with the law, free from interference and undue pressure of any political actor. Their independence and stability are essential pillars of democratic governance, particularly in the final weeks leading up to an election. In addition to our support to DECO's work, Canadian observers will take part in the electoral mission organized by the European Union. supporting collective efforts to ensure a peaceful process and that is transparent and legitimate. Canada calls on all parties in this election and all relevant authorities and institutions in Honduras to respect democratic principles and Honduran law and constitution. We will continue to follow these elections closely and support efforts for a free, fair, and credible result, a result that truly reflects the will of the Honduran people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Now Guatemala has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The delegation of Guatemala expresses thanks for the convening of this special meeting of the Permanent Council to address the situation of the elections in Honduras slated for November 30th of this year. Guatemala appreciates democracy as a pillar of peaceful cohabitation. Based on our own experience, we reassert the importance of transparent, inclusive, and respectful elections, respectful of people's vote, given the very important role that this organization plays in the promotion and defense of democratic principles in the hemisphere. We express our full support for the work of the EOM of the OAS in Honduras, which has clearly stated that elections belong to the Honduran people, and as they express freely their will at the ballot box. Now, the call made by EOM to the institutions of the state, political parties, civil society, and the media, among other actors, to ensure that they all contribute to a successful, trustworthy, transparent election within the constraints of the rule of law. We also agree with the message issued by the General Secretary regarding the importance that all actors respect the Constitution and support the holding of general elections on the date for which it was slated under the best possible conditions. We appreciate the presence of other EOMs, such as that of the European Union and those of Canada and Norway, whose participation will contribute to these elections in our sister republic to be carried out in an orderly way, strengthening public trust in the election. Mr. Chairman, distinguished representatives, the cumulative experience in the region confirms that international oversight of elections doesn't interfere. It only generates trust and contributes to democratic stability. It's essential for the judiciary, the bodies of the judiciary, act independently and prudently and responsibly, fully aware of the impact that their decisions might have on people's vote. Elections belong to the people, and to protect the integrity of vote is to promote and protect democracy itself. We trust that with international observations and the constructive commitment of all of the actors in Honduras, the elections will be held in a peaceful and transparent way. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador, for your intervention. Mexico has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon. Vice Foreign Minister, Electoral Counselor of Mexico. Mexico takes note of the information presented about the development of elections in Honduras, and we assert our commitment in Honduran institutions that they will rise to any challenge that emerges and to make sure that all of the stages of the election are carried out in keeping with its sovereign according to its sovereign laws, in keeping with its own legislation. My delegation reiterates that a key principle of Mexico's foreign policy is the strict compliance or observance of non-intervention in foreign or internal affairs of states enshrined in the OAS Charter and that of the UN, also recognized in the Inter-American Democratic Charter as a matter of soft law. Each member state has the right and the duty to hold their domestic elections without any type of outside interference, and it falls to each country's national institutions to set up the necessary mechanisms to overcome any conflict or difference that might arise. To this effect, Mexico deems it essential that multilateral organizations act always according and only to the extent of their own authorities and faculties, leaving to domestic authorities to address their election process and to not intervene or do anything that could be construed as interference. Now, the building and the strengthening of institutions is something that should always be done within the strictures of international law. International bodies don't have any power to determine national elections, how they're carried out, nor to replace any electoral institutions of sovereign states. Their technical efforts are welcome to show examples of best practices and to devise best policies and to ensure that countries have robust institutions. We make vows that the Honduran people, imbued with the democratic spirit, fully take part in the elections held November 30th. We reiterate our willingness to continue collaborating with all of the member states to promote democracy, development, and human rights in the hemisphere, always based on mutual respect, international law, and the sovereign will of states without any outside meddling. Thank you. I thank you, Ambassador, for your words. Ecuador is recognized for 7 minutes. Mr. Chairman, authorities, and the head table, distinguished representatives, a warm greeting to those who are here, both in person and remotely. Rubén Darío said, that formidable Nicaraguan poet, that Honduras has all of the talent of the world, and it does indeed have it. The Republic of Ecuador thanks the chair for the sensible decision to convene this special meeting of the Permanent Council, as well as the co-sponsors, who also agree on the need to work together based on principles, and we thank the panelists also for their presentations. The matter of Honduras has been made clear. At the same time, we take note of the decision by the National Electoral Council of Honduras in unanimously approving, and I have this in boldface, by unanimity, the accreditation of the mission of bipartisan Congress persons of the U.S. Congress to observe the next elections on November 30th, joining international observers, including the OAS EOM. That decision, after the convening of this Permanent Council, is further food for us to reflect on. Countries of the region are interested in supporting the institutions of Honduras to develop, or carry out rather, free, fair, transparent elections administered by impartial Honduran authorities. From the standpoint of the Republic of Ecuador, there are 3 main aspects I would address. First, Ecuador deems it essential to contribute with its thought and actions to strengthen and to ensure the democratic principles of the region and Honduras, land of the great that we have learned from, thanks to numerous authors and Floylantucios and others, great authors who raised their voice, praying for Honduras, to say that God bless the land where I was born, that is free and civilized. We are firmly committed to contributing to the upholding of democracies in the Americas. The Republic of Ecuador, we respecting the principle of non-intervention, deems it necessary for us to stand side by side with the citizens of Honduras and each one of the branches and functions of the state, as it is a free republic and in keeping with international principles, because to contribute to peace, freedom, and democracy is an unavoidable American duty. With the spirit contained in the American Democratic Charter, which is a bedrock instrument of our hemisphere that reasserts that democracy is a right of peoples as well as a duty and responsibility of governments. Applying it is a collective commitment to preserve constitutional order, transparency of elections and humanistic behavior. The Democratic Charter calls upon us to act collectively to preserve democracy in the event of any threat. Those of us who have come together here at this meeting are doing so not to interfere, but in the absolute respect of the sovereignty of Honduras, to ensure that institutions be given the necessary space and guarantees, and the state carries out its duty of observing its own laws. Now, this is being held to showcase that which has been pointed out by the EOM. That objective, thankfully, has been complied with. The OAS Charter in Article 3 calls upon us to promote and consolidate representative democracy as an indispensable condition to ensure stability, peace, and development in the hemisphere. The Inter-American Democratic Charter recognizes the importance of electoral observation missions as key tools to strengthen transparency and to ensure the integrity of elections. According to the principles expressed in that charter, we support the independent technical support carried out by the EOM in Honduras. We reiterate the importance of the following: that the National Electoral Council be allowed to carry out its functions without any type of interference, independently, to adopt measures to ensure the safety of those working at the electoral poll sites, and to set up a clear procedure and calendar to hold verifiable and trustworthy elections. Mr. Chairman, Ecuador makes vows to ensure that the people of Honduras can vote in a climate of safety in its elections with the presence of EOM observers. For Ecuador, the defense of the rule of law, separation of powers, and democratic institutions are ongoing commitments. And we conclude by saying, and we said a few moments back, Rubén Darío said that Honduras has all of the talent of the world. And it does indeed have it, and has much more than that. It has men and women who want to exercise their free and informed vote in democracy and political security and legal certainty and in development. The only valid thing is to ensure the respect of their vote, and after that, then to act accordingly. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, embajadora, por su intervención.
Thank you for that intervention. Chile has a floor.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you. Chile takes note of the presentations made by the panelists today for our country. An election that is carried out with full transparency and strict adherence to the rule of law is essential to strengthen citizens' trust and to ensure the stability of democracy. Chile, for this reason, appreciates the openness of the Honduran authorities by receiving the EOMs, multiple EOMs, and expresses its full support to the work carried out by this organization's electoral observation mission and all it's doing in the country. Chile invites all of the social and political actors of Honduras, as well as those international parties involved, to collaborate responsibly and in coordination to ensure that these elections be a genuine expression of the popular will. Chile reiterates its willingness to offer support in any way to contribute to the strengthening of democracy in the region, and Honduras is not going to be an exception to that. Thank you. Thank you, Chile. Honduras has requested the floor. This isn't a debate. Honduras already spoke. 20 countries have also spoken in reference to and about Honduras, so if the members agree, and considering that this has been done before, I could give the floor 5 minutes to Honduras for it to refer to some of statements made, without that meaning that we're going to have a back and forth, a rebuttal, or anything of the sort. If the Permanent Council is in agreement, I'll give the floor to Honduras for it to address some of the matters risen. Not to be viewed as a rebuttal of that's said by any of the states, to precisely avoid anything that would bring an untimely end to this debate. So I will give the floor to Honduras to address some of the matters that have been raised today. Would you like to take the floor, Ambassador? Yes, if you just give me a second. Well, Ambassador of Argentina in the meantime. Chairman, let me break the ice. Since no one else said anything on our part, I would say that Honduras should be allowed to express itself. I see no problem with that, as long as there's no particular reference to any of the states, and we don't get into a chain of rebuttals that would be endless. And so I do think Honduras has the right to say what it has to say, and we support that. I thank you for your support, Ambassador Chiniak. Honduras, you have the floor for 5 minutes, and then we will continue with the other missions, observation missions. Thank you very much, Ambassador of Argentina. I think the support that you offered was in keeping with what I actually want to say. So I would like to thank the vast majority of the delegations here for the support that they have given to Honduras. I think we all deserve respect. I would like to referring to our institutions and our civil servants, based on not having much knowledge, I think is a good way to strengthen the principle of self-determination. That said, I would also like to thank all of the delegations who have spoken, who have, the vast majority of which have referred to respect they have for the institutions of Honduras and the elections in Honduras. And I would say that the coup d'etat 16 years back and those forces from that time period continue to haunt my country. And it's with more participation in democracy that we will overcome that and strengthen our rule of law. I would conclude by saying that the success of these elections depend on the participation of the people of Honduras, with a mass showing at the elections, and also with the observation of the international EOMs and that of the OAS in Honduras. Secretary said in perfect Spanish, we have to get out to vote en masse, and to, I would call upon all to do so, to ensure that democracy be that which actually moves us forward, and to put a rest to the specter of the past in my country. So, my President and all of the women, I thank you for your commitment to respect, to continue building a world free of violence for the first citizen. And as Juan Pabon said, poet of Honduras, I thank you for allowing us to speak. I take note of everything that's been said. We stand by to assist in any way we can. I have nothing else to say, so nice Thanksgiving to everyone here in the United States. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Vicecanciller.
Thank you very much, Vice Chancellor. Let me now give the floor to the Electoral Observation Mission of Spain. Thank you very much, Chair. The delegation of Spain would like to express here its thanks and its appreciation for all of the wishes expressed by those who have spoken, including the Vice Minister, Chancellor, or Minister of Foreign Affairs of Honduras, as well as others, and we take due note of every one of your kind comments. Mr. Chairman, Spain remains very concerned as it looks to the events that we are following in Honduras as the elections draw near, scheduled for the last day of this month of November. All of the political forces should bend over backwards to ensure that the electoral process is peaceful and suffers no interference. We also hope that everyone does his and her part with respect for the rule of law and the respect of others. And I say the respect of others very much in contemplation of the people's right to go to the urns and to express their political will for the future of their country. In that regard, the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS is an entity that Spain has very much supported. Spain has, and so too has the delegation of the European Union, of which we are a part. And so for all of its procedures and the role and the support that it expresses on the terrain, representing the international community, we are quite proud and wish it all the best, hopefully with good results. And as has been said, very much in the great expectation that November 30th, the day of the elections in Honduras, goes peacefully and profitably. Thank you. Thank you very much, Spain, says the chair. I'm now pleased to give the floor to the delegation of Italy. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Distinguished Secretary General, and representatives, colleagues all. We are very pleased to attend this special meeting of the Permanent Council because the attention that the OAS is paying at this very moment to the run-up to the elections to be held at the end of November in Honduras could not be more opportune and more therefore necessary, and we very much take into account what has been shared by the Chancellor, Secretary of State of Honduras, as others. These are elections that are going to be important because what's going to be voted is not only the presidency, but the legislative functions and others. This is an important day in the life of any democracy, as a moment of national democracy and what should be a peaceful and constructive national dialogue. Important for any country and certainly for Honduras at this moment. So we hope that this will be an opportunity for there to be social peace and political respect. For that to take place, that people go to the urns in peace, feeling safe, and without any untoward incident. Safety above all. We're pleased to have heard Mr. Pereira Freire-Curso, the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Honduras, and also what has been said by the Secretary General of the OAS, Albert Ramdin. We will be following the measures taken by the Foreign Affairs of Honduras to ensure that elections will be free and fair. This is a key day, and what needs to be done must be done. Italy here would like to contribute to support the Electoral Observation Mission in Honduras, and in doing so, we affirm the value of all democracies and democratic organizations and rallies throughout the hemisphere. In speaking here, and hoping that the representations of the OAS and the EU in general, we hope, therefore, that their presence will be a valid and a worthy contribution to this famous and important electoral day. Thank you. Thank you, Italy. Pleased now to give the floor to the Permanent Observer Mission of the European Union.
Opportunity to speak on behalf of the EU Permanent Observer Mission to the OAS. Let me start by stating that in response to a formal invitation of the Honduran Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the National Electoral Council, the EU deployed an EU election observation mission to observe the general elections of 30 November. This demonstrates the EU's commitment to support democracy in Honduras in line with our long-standing partnership with the country and extensive track record of electoral support. This is the fourth consecutive EU EOM in Honduras. So we feel very dedicated to this process. We are also financing a dedicated program, EuroElect, implemented by UNDP to support national electoral institutions as well as civil society organizations for implementing initiatives to promote citizen and civic participation with a particular focus on underrepresented and vulnerable groups. To this end, the EU's High Representative and Vice President Kaya Kallas appointed a Mr. Francisco Assis, a member of the European Parliament, as the chief observer, who has been already in place since the end of October. The EOM will deliver a comprehensive, independent, and impartial assessment of the electoral process based on international and regional standards that Honduras has committed to and the Honduran National Legal Framework. As per our usual practice, at the conclusion of its work, the EOM will issue a public final report including recommendations. In the run-up to this Sunday's election, just a week ago, the EU issued a spokesperson statement exactly reading as follows. The European Union is closely following the situation ahead of the general elections scheduled to take place on the 30th of November in Honduras, and the EU expresses its concern about recent developments affecting the institutional framework and preparations for the elections. Thus, the EU calls on the Honduran authorities and on all political parties and actors to ensure that electoral institutions are able to operate independently and effectively in line with the Constitution. Transparency, credibility, stability, and political inclusiveness are essential to enable Honduran citizens to vote in a peaceful and orderly environment. As I had mentioned before, the EU deployed an electoral observation mission following a formal invitation from the Honduran authorities and the National Electoral Council as part of its ongoing commitment to supporting democracy and the rule of law in the country. As in any election, it is of paramount importance that all political actors and state institutions assume their responsibility in compliance with the rule of law and Constitution in order to guarantee transparent, credible, and inclusive elections and increase citizens' trust in democratic institutions. Once again, thank you, Chair.
Muchas gracias por su intervención.
Thank you, Madam. Pleased to give the floor now to France. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished Executive Director, Assistant Executive Director, dear colleagues. France has taken good note of the statement of the 11th of November statement of the Director General of the OAS and other statements. We are very, very deeply concerned with regard to the electoral process in Honduras, and therefore we echo the points made by the 18th of November appeal and call, rather, that all electoral missions act in genuine independence. And we also wholeheartedly support the electoral observation mission of the European Union. France is irrevocably linked to democracy and upholds democracy as a means of peace and stability. And that is what we hope for Central America as well as so many others. We are determined to assist free and transparent electoral process that we consider absolutely essential to guarantee the legitimacy of governments and peace in those countries. The electoral observation of the mission of the OAS is therefore something that we will be very happy to continue to support as a means to uphold democratic institutions and to ensure that the citizens of this hemisphere can and should be heard. Thank you. Thank you, France. And I'm pleased now to give the floor to the Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, distinguished permanent representatives, Vice Minister Torres of Honduras, permanent observers, ladies and gentlemen. I have listened carefully and with deep attention to the presentations made by the invited guests and also to the interventions from the member states. Rest assured that our electoral observation mission will seriously take note of all the observations made and suggestions and concerns raised. The Organization of American States has been monitoring the preparation for these important elections very closely. This mission has been engaged in Honduras early March of this year, as early as early March this year, when a team of experts visited to observe the primary elections. Political and electoral actors that contribute to the organization of the November 30th elections have been also interviewed then. And I must say that some of the concerns which were identified since then have been addressed. I want to inform you that last week, the deployment of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission in Honduras started with the arrival of the Deputy Head of Mission, Gerardo Sanchez, and the General Coordinator, Rogelio Cantoral. The mission will continue with its involvement in the electoral process, guided by the principles of objectivity and neutrality, non-substitution of national actors, respect for domestic law, and guarantees of independence and transparency in accordance with the mandate of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Over the past weeks, the Secretariat, myself, we have held several meetings with different prominent persons and experts to be briefed on procedures, the political climate in the country, other key issues, as well as the public sentiment in the country ahead of these important elections. Subsequently, I issued a public statement calling on all actors to respect the institutional framework and to work constructively towards holding the elections on the established date under the best possible conditions, a call we today firmly reiterate. At the moment, the head of mission, Mr. Eladio Loizaga, has arrived in Tegucigalpa to join the team of experts and observers. This mission will comprise more than 100 members deployed across all departments in Honduras, including specialists in 8 areas such as electoral technology, campaign financing, electoral justice, and electoral violence. I'd like to inform you as well that Secretary Krajewicz of the Secretariat for Democracy will travel tomorrow to Honduras as well on behalf of the Secretariat. In the coming days, the mission will meet with government authorities, electoral bodies, candidates, civil society representatives, academia, the private sector, other observations missions, and members of the international community accredited in Honduras. Based on these meetings, a thorough review of regulations and relevant documents, and direct observation, the mission will continue its comprehensive analysis of the electoral process. Apart from reporting on the political process, the EOM will report on the execution and the conduct of the process and procedures with regard to these elections. The EOM will, if necessary, issue statements regarding concerns as the process continues. The EOM will also issue its independent report soon after the elections. Mr. Chair, distinguished permanent representative, I want to repeat my earlier call last week for elections to be held free from any political interference by state institutions. Respect for the independence of electoral institutions must be demonstrated in no uncertain terms by all forces in Honduran society. The General Secretariat of the organization remains firmly committed to supporting transparent, free and fair elections in Honduras and to the strengthening of its democratic institutions. We urge all political leaders, presidential candidates, the private sector, civil society organizations, and citizens to contribute positively in the upcoming days, up to the 30th of November, to ensure an orderly, secure, and peaceful electoral process. Every eligible Honduran must be afforded the opportunity to take part in this fundamental democratic exercise, free from fear and in full freedom. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Secretario General.
Thank you very much, Secretary General.
Thank you, Secretary.
De hoy,
Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. That concludes all matters on today's agenda. Having concluded the matters to be addressed during this special Permanent Council, we are hereby adjourned.